What do CEOs need to know about sales these days? A lot. Outdated sales strategies and tactics plague most companies today. Listen to what innovative CEOs and experts have to say about how to change all that with Sales Talk for CEOs. Welcome to Sales Talk for CEOs. Back with another episode and excited to share, but I got to ask you one favor first. I'm really trying to grow my YouTube presence and it's working, but I need your help. So if you would just get on over to YouTube and subscribe and maybe make a comment on one of the videos that you enjoy, I would love it. So thank you so much for doing that. And our guest today, well, this person is known for saying QA is boring. Yet he started a company around that. Now, some of you might be asking, well, what is QA? Oh, that's when you are checking things very specifically to make sure there's no mistakes in them. But we'll let Jay tell you more about that in a minute. But he left his company doing a QA job, did some consulting, and started a company. So we want to hear his journey to founding JDAQA software testing. Welcome to the show, Jay.
So, hello, thank you for having me. It's a great show.
Well, thank you. It's always exciting to have a founder on and to hear the story. So before we go back in time, tell us a little bit about what I have to look at it to say it, JDAQA software testing does today.
So we are a scalable team of QA engineers that'll come in and consult people, processes, strategy on how to alleviate QA bottlenecks and how to get better quality builds out the door quicker. That's what we do. Work with a lot of software companies as their outsourced QA department.
Yeah, and I think that's so important, right? Because when we build something and then we also look at it, and even if we have another group within our own company, right? We're not that outside influence looking in that may ask harder questions.
Yep, that's why that's why your property inspector does not work for your construction company, right? Like that's why
Right.
there's a difference in that.
Absolutely. All right. So take us back. It's been about 9 years, maybe a little longer, but what were you doing right before you got the idea to start this company?
I was doing quality assurance work for a home automation company. We did Internet of Things back then, which was still kind of a new territory. And my wife was an overnight nurse at like a long-term care facility for kids. And I was like, I visited one time and was like, I should probably try to figure out how to get her out of this. And I applied for Uber and Lyft, and my license was from like Virginia, where I used to live. So I couldn't even, Uber turned me down basically. So I was trying to I was looking everywhere I could for extra gigs and like looking at stock boy jobs and whatever. I found elance.com, which was, the precursor to Upwork. I think they merged or got bought or whatever. Created a profile on there and started doing consulting and freelancing. And that's kind of how I started the company.
Wow. So the need to make some extra dollars to get your wife out of something she was doing that wasn't really working for her very well. You just looking around for something extra, found that you could do this consulting on the side.
Yep. Yep. It was at one point, I mean, I probably had 3 or 4 different consulting gigs going while I still had my 9 to 5, on breaks or like when I would go on lunch or like before work or after work. I was just kind of like building this profile and kind of presence on Upwork, which I think I would say is a bit of a cheat code when it comes to business, having a marketplace like that of people who are wanting your services. So if you have one of those available to you, take every opportunity you can.
Great. So how long was it before you were like, hey, I can actually quit my other job and make more money and maybe even turn this into a business?
So I got laid off from that job, the same job, probably a year later. I had a few clients. I was like, all right, I'll just do this full time. I did it for a few months, and then one of our clients wanted to hire me. So I said, sure. And I went and worked as a senior executive at a fintech company for probably a year or two. The business was still running, doing its thing, and then kind of parted ways with that company and said, I have had my fill of having bosses that I may or may not agree with all the time. And I love this. I love running a business. Like it's the most exciting, fun thing for me. So I just kind of use that as an excuse and opportunity to strike out on my own. And it's been great ever since.
All right. So you said this is it. I'm planting a stake in the ground. I'm going to start this business. So where did the first customers come from?
So Upwork was the first customers. Like I said, closed marketplace is a little bit of a fish in the barrel kind of environment. I wouldn't say that everybody has that luxury, but when we stepped outside of Upwork, once we kind of really tried to make it a real business, then we started doing all the normal stuff, right? Joining chambers of commerce, joining all the business groups in the area, doing outbound prospecting on LinkedIn and reaching out to folks and using our network. So one of our very first customers, and still a customer today, and probably one of our best salespeople, honestly, because he tells everybody to go use this, is a company out of Philadelphia called ArcWeb. I always like to tell the story. I had to go buy a suit to pitch for them. Like I didn't even have a new, so I had to go buy a suit and go to their office. And like I flew our COO in from Ohio, and so that was our first like real in-person customer, and our like kind of how we got a foothold in the Philadelphia tech scene.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Okay, so you're kind of doing local, getting out there, meeting people, but then you're also starting to make some lists and do some outbound using LinkedIn, and customers started to roll in. So where was the point where you had to start hiring other people? Who did you hire first? And then when did you decide to hire other sellers besides yourself?
So it's been founder-led sales for most of the history of the company. That usually ends in like 50 different spreadsheets and 3 CRMs and a bunch of incomplete follow-ups and like everything that you would imagine founder-led sales looking like. My first hire was actually a guy that I used to work with, Chris Phillips, who still works with us today. That was probably 7 or 8 years ago. He was a QA engineer, so I started kind of pulling more engineers and started to have handoff work to them. One of our awesome engineers, Autumn, like kind of showed a lot of promise and like worked her way into being the CEO of the company, and we promoted within. She kind of runs the operations side of the business, and then we kind of just built out the QA team and operations under them. And we met some people in the Philippines, so now we have a team of probably 30 or 40 people in the Philippines, in addition to our 20 plus in the United States. So probably around 60 folks. And then sometime this year, I started kind of getting serious about outbound sales. I hired and parted ways with 2 SDRs in the
Mm.
course of about 3 months. I would say it's probably half and half of like communication from their end, but also not having an infrastructure in place that was like really friendly to having our own salespeople. So I contracted with a company called Rev Pilots, which was great. They got us a fractional sales leader, and he came in and like put together a go-to-market strategy for us. Like I didn't ever had that. Everything's been all over the place in different pieces and buckets and wherever. But to have a nice plan of like here's our event, that lead to external triggers, right? So like things that happen out in the world that would indicate to us that those people are ready to buy, or that they have our pain points that we know we can sell into. So that has been over the last few months, and like we've seen a lot. I'm basically going back to being main sales guy, but I now at least have a system to work out of, which is like light years beyond where we've ever been before. And now we're actively going the other route and trying to source some talent from other companies that sell IT services or do QA or whatever else, instead of just putting a job post up and sifting through 600 people. So that's where we are today. Founder-led sales still, but with a very nice framework for outbound. We've got some automated outbound campaigns, but I'm really big on personalization and like just trying to cut through the noise as much as possible.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to unpack there, and I think some really important things that you mentioned. So, when you first started to hire, you took some things off your plate. So you're not selling and delivering, right? Doing all the work yourself. And I think it's so smart to start there and get some other people to do the work, right? So you can continue doing the selling, because founder led sales, especially in the early days, right? Nothing beats it.
Yep.
I've had every company, yeah, I can think of, try everything else. And I'm back to founder led sales, because that's what works in the beginning, using your network, finding great people, word of mouth from the customers who love you. That all really works in the beginning, and having offloading other things to other people that they can do, and you doing what you're best at, and what really in the beginning only you can do as founder, right? So very, very good. And then not unusual to hear that hired and let go of salespeople, SDRs, because it's hard, right? Especially when, like you said, a very important thing. We didn't really have a framework for them to work within. we just like threw them in there. Hey, make some calls, right? I mean, I'm sure you had some ideal customer profile for them and some lists, but there wasn't really a framework for them to have success. So
Yep.
it wasn't going to work. And that is not atypical. I mean, I've heard that a lot of times. I love that you sought out a fractional leader who was able to come in and take a look at everything
I thought
and
you would
give
like
you,
that. I thought you
yeah,
would like that.
and give you a plan, right? You're like, hallelujah, we have a plan.
Yes. Yes.
Now you can actually conduct sales. And I think what's so smart is still being founder led, right? Now, like you said, it's organized for you because you mentioned spreadsheets and lack of follow up and blah. Of course, because you're trying to run a company and do the sales.
Yep.
And most CEOs, founders are terrible at the follow up that's needed to be in sales, right? So, getting yourself a sales assistant or a system or a program, a plan, that's what works, right? Because then the CEO can just go out and do what they do best, which is talk to people and customize an approach for them and close the deal.
Yep.
So, congratulations on getting that much done.
Thank
And
you.
sounds like you're kind of moving forward now from there, which I love.
Yes.
So now if you hire salespeople, you have a framework to plug them into.
But and the biggest part of that framework to me is the accountability that we have baked into dashboards, or just some basic rudimentary, like who's doing what. And it's, you want to trust people, but it's really hard to do that in sales and just like hope that something, that people are doing what they're supposed to be doing. It's like, especially new people, younger salespeople who are like maybe don't have a ton of experience. You're always worried that are they doing what they're supposed to be? And now we have a place to like look at that every week with them and go like, here's the outbound you've done, here's the responses, here's where the deals are in the pipeline. And like it feels like we're much better set up for success now, to put people into that system, which I'm super excited
Right.
about.
Right. Without a strategy and the tactics to go with it, it's hard to hold people accountable.
Yeah.
What should they be doing, right?
Right.
And as a founder, you're busy doing a lot of other things, and the way you sell is not the way a seller will do it because
Yep.
you have that title, you have that gravitas, you know it best, right? So you got to plug a seller in and be very important. You've got to be able to hold them accountable to that.
Yep.
So that's what's great about having a system and having a leader who can help you with that. So I'm curious now, so what are you doing that's working today in terms of lead gen? What kinds of things are working best? Like, are referrals your biggest source of new business? What is that for you?
I have a love-hate relationship with referrals. I love them obviously because they're like the best type of new business, and I thank everyone who ever sends me but they're not scalable. You can't build like a
Right.
predictive,
That's
any
right.
sort of, projections about what referrals you're going to get. So I think our biggest one honestly has been outbound through LinkedIn. I had a guest on my podcast months ago, and he said something to me at the time I kind of laughed at, and then I was like, man, that's actually really, really smart. He wanted to be the business connections guy of Rochester, New York. His name's Ben Albert. He runs Balbert Marketing. Great guy. It's a great podcast. But at the time I was like, who the hell wants to be the business connection guys of Raw? And then I was thinking, well, wait a minute. I'm like, why am I not the QA guy of Philadelphia? I'm like, there's more than enough business here. We have tons of tech companies. We have tons of opportunity. Like, I'm here. So why would I not just use the advantage of, like, I call it the hometown discount of being like, I can say go Birds. I can say go Phillies. I can say, all these things that resonate with people in my area. And oh, by the way, I'm in their area when I reach out with them on LinkedIn. So they're like, the connection rate is much higher. So I've really refocused over the last year or so of like getting the companies in Philadelphia that I know and that other people know as customers of ours. And we've done a pretty good job of it. That's been through LinkedIn outreach. It's been through, lots of warm introductions because I've networked really hard over the last couple of years with a lot of the business groups. And just, some of the conferences we have in town are pretty good for networking as well. So it's just been a combination like business development stuff and partnerships that we're leaning on a lot right now.
Well, and really niching in like that, I think is excellent because the messaging, like you said, oh, there's things that people in Philadelphia have in common, right? So use those as connectors, right?
Yep.
And niching in is always going to, I shouldn't say always, but almost always going to bring you better business because you know exactly who you're talking to and you're talking to them.
Yep.
and it can be highly customized. So,
Yeah.
especially when you're in a very big city, I think a lot of companies don't exploit that local. They want to get business globally. Well, like start in your own backyard,
Yeah.
and you can actually get out there and do things and have more connectors like you were talking about. So I think that's a great approach. And obviously it's working really well, which is wonderful. So in this lead generation, have you found any uses for AI recently?
So I try. I don't. I do a lot of personalized stuff. I don't like the long-winded, like salesy stuff. I'm very personalized. So for messaging, I've tried it and haven't loved it. For some research stuff, the results can be a little biased sometimes. We were talking before the show about how it told me, hey, you're one of the top QA companies. I said, what do who are the top ones? And they listed me. But then I said, why did you list me? And they're like, well, because we kind of know, we knew that you would like to see it. Literally, and I couldn't believe it. So um, I mean, I certainly think there's gonna be uses and maybe for some list building and like different things like that. But for the most part, um, we'll use it for ideas and like some, just rough draft stuff. But messaging and targeting we've stayed away from. So if you know of AI areas that people are crushing it in, I would love to know because I haven't really seen any yet.
Yeah, well, I think that the AI is good if you pay for it and train it, right? So
Sure.
just using ChatGPT or Perplexity or any of them, there's so many, right? Um, and using kind of their open free version. Yeah, it's going to get you, like you said, oh, hey, yeah, Alice, you're the best one. Well,
Right.
thanks
Right.
for saying that. I appreciate it, but I need to know what other companies, right? I
Right.
think learning to prompt is really important as well. So if you pay for whichever brand of, AI you want to pay for, and then you train it, and then you're good at prompting, I believe you can get some really good results. So some of the things that we've been using it for is an example we'll use right out of Philadelphia, right? Perplexity, build me a list of companies in Philadelphia that,
Hmm.
and I give it all the parameters, right?
Yep.
And it in seconds, right, can build me that list. And then the humans still need to go through that list and pick the ones they want to work on, right? But then after, let's say it gives you a list of 100 and you pick 20 you're going to go after, then I say, Perplexity, use this dossier that I've written out, tells you what information I want, and fill it in on this particular company. Then it populates that document and I get great information on that company. So now
Hmm.
I can fill my brain with some things I know about this company. I asked it, what's the latest news on this company? Is one of the things I wanted to populate.
Hmm.
And then, of course, I'll still go to LinkedIn. A human still needs to be involved, right? I'll still go to LinkedIn and learn as much as I can. But now I'm really prepared. I've got a good list. I know everything I can about those companies, and it helped me learn it faster than if I had to go research it all myself.
Yep.
And then I can write really great messaging to each person like you do, which I really love. But I can also, I've trained Perplexity, and so have several of my clients trained ChatGPT to write what Samantha McKenna, my good friend, calls show me you know me messaging.
Hmm.
And that's what you're talking about. Like, I want to customize this. Not necessarily, I mean, it could be a team or where you went to school, especially if you're in a proximity, right? But
Right.
it's more about, hey, I know your business. I know the kinds of things you think about as a VP, COO, whatever. And, these are some things that you're thinking about that we can help with, kind of thing.
Sure.
It's highly customized. So it can start and draft, like you said, we're never going to be satisfied with that. Again, a human needs to be involved. So
Right.
that's the way I'm using it personally. We're using it with my clients to help us build lists, do research, and then, get some drafts written so we can kind of work from there.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah. And it sounds like you're doing some of that,
I'm
but
doing some of that. Yeah.
you
There's
know,
certainly room for improvement on our usage of it. But definitely I love the list building and kind of the filling out a little dossier of each company. That's cool.
yeah, and as you scale, right? And you don't want to be the only salesperson or you want to increase your sales, it just saves you time.
Yep. Yep.
And that's what I really love about it for salespeople. And people always ask me, well, do you think AI is going to replace salespeople? My answer is not in my lifetime anyway,
Right. Yep. Yeah.
But salespeople who use AI will be replacing those who don't. That's
Yes.
for sure. Because
100%.
we have to be more efficient, right? We have to
Yep.
be more effective. So, yeah. So, anyway, there's a few ideas for you. All right. So, what's next? What's next? How are you going to grow next? What are you looking forward to?
Partnerships.
Yes.
Bob Moore wrote a book called Ecosystem Led Growth. That wasn't the book I was going to say was my favorite, by the
Okay.
way,
But we'll
about
put that
sales,
in the
but
show notes.
Ecosystem Led Growth. I've had Bob on our podcast, and he's a Philly guy, and he owns a company called Crossbeam, which is like a partnership ecosystem platform where you can kind of like, if you and I were on there, we could share lead information and kind of, it's like a controlled partnership ecosystem where and you build out this kind of mesh network of a bunch of different
Nice.
partners on there. So partners. There's like really big QA tools companies in our space. And a lot of those companies, they just want to make products. They don't want to have product services, a professional services arm. They don't want to do implementation and support. They want to build products and iterate on those products and make those products bigger and sell seats to those products, not necessarily like deal with the implementation. So strategic partnerships with tools companies, and then strategic partnerships with other agencies that do kind of ancillary services to us, like project management as a service, or development service companies. A lot of the times we can come in as like a third-party auditor to an existing dev shop. So there's lots of different partnerships opportunities, which is what I'm spending my time on. Which is why I'm trying to kind of spin up and hand off this sales stuff. Not that I'm not going to sell, but I think just having somebody do that full time while I'm off kind of playing golf and having lunches is what I love to tell my wife. But just like doing the more strategic partnership stuff is to the point we're at today.
Yeah, you have my stamp of approval big time on that. Like, I think in today's market, anybody who's not exploiting partnerships, right? And I mean that in a good way, right?
Right.
It's crazy. Like, why wouldn't you?
Yep.
Why wouldn't you? And I think that's a great direction for you to go. Hand off the outbound list building, calling, citywide, countrywide, whatever you're going to do, hand that off and you focus on partnerships. I think today it takes a really great combination of referrals and having a formal referral process at your company, so everybody's consistently asking people who know you and love you, hey, who can you introduce us to, or do you know this person, can you introduce me, on a regular basis, like making that a formal process, right? And then strategic outbound, not just crazy outbound, not spamming, but what you're doing, very specific audience with a specific message, strategic outbound, and partners. Like, that's a winning formula. We can get there with that, right?
I'm hoping
So, love that you mentioned partners. All right. Well, I know that we could probably chat about this stuff all day long. I always have such a good time with my guests, and I would like to just wrap up with a couple of kind of rapid fire questions. I know you're prepared for those. So let's jump to that. All right. First question. What is a book? And you did also already tell us a great book, but what is the book that every CEO should read?
Fanatical Prospecting by Jeb Blount.
Jeb. He is such a great guy. Oh my
You
gosh.
got to
I've
read
known
that
him
book.
for
You just
years.
got to read that book. You got to read
It is so good. It is so good. Fanatical Prospecting. Yes, absolutely. All right. Next one. What is a podcast that you listen to because it makes you think differently?
Man. I was going to say my own podcast. I'm not going to do that. I won't say that.
We'll talk about that in a minute.
I will say one that's not anything related to anything. I'm a huge history guy, and I love the Explorers podcast on Spotify and Apple Music. It's all about the explorers and like their journeys across the world and like finding new worlds and stuff like that, which I find super interesting. So that makes me think different, and it kind of gets me out of all my business books and podcasts and stuff. It's something kind of fun but also pretty educational. So I'll go
Yeah,
with the
that
Explorers
is so
podcast.
important. I love that. I listen to some things that are totally nothing to do with business also for that same reason. It just gives your brain a break, but it
Yep.
also makes you think, and
Yeah.
it's very stimulating. So I just love that. All right, last question. What does every CEO need to know to win in this market?
Consistency is key. That's it. You just got to consistently show up.
Yeah.
It's really not that hard. It's especially in a services agency business. Me specifically, that's my biggest thing that I remind myself all the time is you're the one who started the business. You're the one who had the idea. You're the one who had the passion to begin with. So just show up every day.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. All right, before we jump off, I want to talk about your podcast a little bit. We mentioned it here and there, but you have a podcast also, and it's called The First Customer. Tell us about that podcast. Why did you start it? And, why do you keep doing it?
My friend beforehand said, "Hey, you should start a podcast." And I said, "That's the dumbest idea I've ever heard." And then like a month later, I started a podcast. Shout out to Russ for giving me the idea. Um, I started it because I wanted to do some content creation stuff. It was something I'd never done before. I'd never done like YouTube videos or whatever, and it was like kind of uncomfortable. And like I kind of like to do things that make me a little uncomfortable that could be advantageous to me later down the road. So we just started going. I made actually like I call it like my favorite mistake, which was like I used LinkedIn automation for outbound stuff, and so I teed up like 800 messages to people that had founder in their title on my network and was like, "Hey, I'm starting this podcast. Would you want to be on?" Thinking nobody would reply, and then I got like 300 responses. So
Wow.
so I had a lot to get through, and I was doing like 10 a week at some point. And some were kind of close to targets, some were not at all. Some were just people in Philly, some were people from wherever that I'd met them before. But we have got deals from it. It's a great. There's almost no better icebreaker to start a conversation with a potential prospect then hey, do you want to be on my podcast? Especially in person. I will walk right up to the person after they walk off stage. And one of my Chris Sarah, actually, Mark Webb always says, like, sack the quarterback, like go right for the person that you want to talk to. So I go right up to him and I'm like, you did great up there. I loved it. And blah, blah, blah. I would love to have you on the podcast. Here's my card. I hit him up a week later and then on the podcast. And some of those have turned into, $250,000, $500,000 a year deals, which have been great for us. So now I'm targeting that more. I still do it because I love it. I think it is cool. I think it's like it's become like a thing, which is fun. It's like its own momentum, its own product, its own whatever. So it's good. I really enjoy it, and I think we're going to focus more on. And we talked about it a little bit before the show, but like how to strategically position the offering that we have for a potential customer while not being salesy, because that's the worst thing. Like it's
Right.
the worst thing to be in a private, space like this, and you go, "Oh, I'm just being pitched the whole time." Like
Right.
it's not. It's like the worst kind of feeling, and I've been there before, so I'm very cognizant about that. But I've done little things like uh, instead of prepending a video to the start that was my advertisement, I would say it during the episode, so the guest that was on could hear me saying, "Hey, if you need a quality, resource," because they may never see the clip at the beginning if they
Right.
don't watch from the start or whatever. So just little things like that, and then trying to target a little bit more. Directly over the next few months and getting some people on that could be customers. And if they're not, I just like to meet really successful founders in the Philly and kind of East Coast United States area. So yeah, I just love it.
I think it's a smart strategy for building your brand. Obviously, I do it for that reason as well, to meet new people, meet other people like-minded, and maybe get a few customers out of it, but
Yeah.
not, like you said, not being salesy. But well, great. Thank you so much. Your podcast is fun, by the way. Everybody should
Thank you.
listen. And
Thank
we'll
you.
put it in the show notes for sure. It's called The First Customer. And then if you do need some QA on your software, I want you to be able to get a hold of Jay,
Yep.
because I'm sure his company would do a fantastic job for you. So, Jay, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Alice. It was great.
If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.